24. The elms and the poplars were turning their ruffled backs to a sudden onslaught of wind, and a black thunderhead loomed above Ramsdale's white church tower when I looked around me for the last time. For unknown adventures I was leaving the livid house where I had rented a room only 10 weeks before. The shades, thrifty, practical bamboo shades, were already down. On porches or in the house their rich textures lend modern drama. The house of heaven must seem pretty bare after that. A raindrop fell on my knuckles. I went back into the house for something or other while John was putting my bags into the car, and then a funny thing happened. I do not know if in these tragic notes I have sufficiently stressed the peculiar sending effect that the writer's good looks pseudo-Celtic, attractively simian, boyishly manly had on women of every age and environment. Of course, such announcements made in the first person may sound ridiculous. But every once in a while I have to remind the reader of my appearance much as a professional novelist, who has given a character of his some mannerism or a dog, has to go on producing that dog or that mannerism every time the character crops up in the course of the book. There may be more to it in the present case. My gloomy good looks should be kept in the mind's eye if my story is to be properly understood. Pubescent Lo swooned to Humbert's charm as she did to Hickey music. Adult Lot loved me with a mature, possessive passion that I now deplore and respect more than I care to say. Jean Farlow, who was 31 and absolutely neurotic, had also apparently developed a strong liking for me. She was handsome in a carved Indian sort of way, with a burnt sienna complexion. Her lips were like large crimson polyps, and when she emitted her special barking laugh, she showed large dull teeth and pale gums. She was very tall, wore either slacks with sandals or billowing skirts with ballet slippers, drank any strong liquor in any amount. He had 2 miscarriages, wrote stories about animals, painted, as the reader knows, lakescapes, was already nursing the cancer that was to kill her at 33, and was hopelessly unattractive to me. Judge then of my alarm when a few seconds before I left, she and I stood in the hallway. Jean, with her always trembling fingers, took me by the temples, and, tears in her bright blue eyes, attempted, unsuccessfully, to glue herself to my lips. "Take care of yourself," she said, "kiss your daughter for me." A clap of thunder reverberated throughout the house, and she added, "Perhaps, somewhere, someday, at a less miserable time, we may see each other again, Jean, wherever you are, in minus time space or plus soul time, forgive me all this, parenthesis included." And presently I was shaking hands with both of them in the street, the sloping street, and everything was whirling and flying before the approaching white deluge, and a truck with a mattress from Philadelphia was confidently rolling down to an empty house, and dust was running and writhing over the exact slab of stone where Charlotte, when they lifted the laprobe for me, had been revealed, curled up, her eyes intact, their black lashes still wet, matted, like yours, Lolita. 25. One might suppose that with all blocks removed and a prospect of delirious and unlimited delights before me, I would have mentally sunk back, heaving a sigh of delicious relief. Eh bien, pas du tout. Instead of basking in the beams of smiling chance, I was obsessed by all sorts of purely ethical doubts and fears. For instance, might it not surprise people that Lo was so consistently debarred from attending festive and funeral functions in her immediate family? You remember we had not had her at our wedding. Or another thing, granted it was the long hairy arm of coincidence that had reached out to remove an innocent woman, might coincidence not ignore in a heathen moment what its twin lamb had done and hand Lo a premature note of commiseration? True, the accident had been reported only by the Ramsdale Journal, not by the Parkington Recorder or the Climax Herald, Camp Q being in another state, and local deaths having no federal news interest, but I could not help fancying that somehow Dolly Haze had been informed already, and that at the very time I was on my way to fetch her, she was being driven to Ramsdale by friends unknown to me. Still more disquieting than all these conjectures and worries, was the fact that Humbert Humbert, a brand new American citizen of obscure European origin, had taken no steps toward becoming the legal guardian of his dead wife's daughter, 12 years and 7 months old. Would I ever dare take those steps? I could not repress a shiver whenever I imagined my nudity hemmed in by mysterious statutes in the merciless glare of the common law. My scheme was a marvel of primitive art. I would whiz over to Camp Q, tell Lolita her mother was about to undergo a major operation at an invented hospital, and then keep moving with my sleepy nymphette from inn to inn while her mother got better and finally died. But as I traveled campward, my anxiety grew. I could not bear to think I might not find Lolita there, or find, instead, another, scared, Lolita clamoring for some family friend, not the Farlows. Thank God she hardly knew them, but might there not be other people I had not reckoned with? Finally, I decided to make the long-distance call I had simulated so well a few days before. It was raining hard when I pulled up in a muddy suburb of Parkington, just before the fork, one prong of which bypassed the city and led to the highway which crossed the hills to Lake Climax and Camp Q. I flipped off the ignition and for quite a minute sat in the car bracing myself for that telephone call, and staring at the rain, at the inundated sidewalk, at a hydrant, a hideous thing, really, painted a thick silver and red, extending the red stumps of its arms to be varnished by the rain which like stylized blood dripped upon its argent chains. No wonder that stopping beside those nightmare cripples is taboo. I drove up to a gasoline station. A surprise awaited me when at last the coins had satisfactorily clanked down and a voice was allowed to answer mine. Holmes, the camp mistress, informed me that Dolly had gone Monday, this was Wednesday, on a hike in the hills with her group and was expected to return rather late today. Would I care to come tomorrow, and what was exactly? Without going into details, I said that her mother was hospitalized, that the situation was grave, that the child should not be told it was grave, and that she should be ready to leave with me tomorrow afternoon. The two voices parted in an explosion of warmth and goodwill, and through some freak mechanical flaw all my coins came tumbling back to me with a hitting the jackpot clatter that almost made me laugh despite the disappointment at having to postpone bliss. One wonders if this sudden discharge, this spasmodic refund, was not correlated somehow, in the mind of McFate, with my having invented that little expedition before ever learning of it as I did now. What next? I proceeded to the business center of Parkington and devoted the whole afternoon. The weather had cleared, the wet town was like silver and glass, to buying beautiful things for low. Goodness, what crazy purchases were prompted by the poignant predilection Humbert had in those days for check weaves, bright cottons, frills, puffed-out short sleeves, soft pleats, snug-fitting bodices and generously full skirts. Oh Lolita, you are my girl, as V was pose and be danties, and what little girl would not like to whirl in a circular skirt and scanties? Did I have something special in mind? Coaxing voices asked me. Swimming suits? We have them in all shades. Dream pink, frosted aqua, glance mauve, tulip red, owala black. What about playsuits? Slips? No slips. Lo, and I loathed slips. One of my guides in these matters was an anthropometric entry made by her mother on Lo's 12th birthday. The reader remembers that Know Your Child book. I had the feeling that Charlotte, moved by obscure motives of envy and dislike, had added an inch here, a pound there, but since the nymphette had no doubt grown somewhat in the last 7 months, I thought I could safely accept most of those January measurements: hip girth, 29 inches, thigh girth, just below the gluteal sulcus, 17, calf girth and neck circumference, 11, chest circumference, 27, upper arm girth, 8, waist, 23, stature, 57 inches, weight, 78 pounds, figure, linear, intelligence quotient, 121, vermiform appendix present, thank God. Apart from measurements, I could of course visualize Lolita with hallucinational lucidity, and nursing as I did a tingle on my breastbone at the exact spot her silky top had come level once or twice with my heart, and feeling as I did her warm weight in my lap, so that, in a sense, I was always with Lolita as a woman is with child, I was not surprised to discover later that my computation had been more or less correct. Having moreover studied a midsummer sale book, it was with a very knowing air that I examined various pretty articles, sport shoes, sneakers, pumps of crushed kid for crushed kids. The painted girl in black who attended to all these poignant needs of mine turned parental scholarship and precise description into commercial euphemisms, such as petite. Another, much older woman, in a white dress, with a pancake makeup, seemed to be oddly impressed by my knowledge of junior fashions. Perhaps I had a midget for mistress, so, when shown a skirt with cute pockets in front, I intentionally put a naive male question and was rewarded by a smiling demonstration of the way the zipper worked in the back of the skirt. I had next great fun with all kinds of shorts and briefs, fandom, little Lolitas dancing, falling, daissying all over the counter. We rounded up the deal with some prim cotton pajamas in popular butcher boy style. Humbert, the popular butcher. There is a touch of the mythological and the enchanted in those large stores where, according to ads, a career girl can get a complete desk-to-date wardrobe, and where little sister can dream of the day when her wool jersey will make the boys in the back row of the classroom drool. Life-size plastic figures of snub-nosed children with dun-colored, greenish, brown-dotted, faunish faces floated around me. I realized I was the only shopper in that rather eerie place where I moved about fish-like, in a glaucous aquarium. I sensed strange thoughts form in the minds of the languid ladies that escorted me from counter to counter, from rock ledge to seaweed, and the belts and the bracelets I chose seemed to fall from siren hands into transparent water. I bought an elegant valise, had my purchases put into it, and repaired to the nearest hotel, well pleased with my day. Somehow, in connection with that quiet poetical afternoon of fastidious shopping, I recalled the hotel or inn with the seductive name of the Enchanted Hunters which Charlotte had happened to mention shortly before my liberation. With the help of a guidebook I located it in the secluded town of Bryceland, a 4-hour drive from Lowe's camp. I could have telephoned, but fearing my voice might go out of control and lapse into coy croaks of broken English, I decided to send a wire ordering a room with twin beds for the next night. What a comic, clumsy, wavering Prince Charming the First was. How some of my readers will laugh at me when I tell them the trouble I had with the wording of my telegram. What should I put, Humbert and daughter? Humbert and small daughter? Humbert and immature girl? Humbert and child? The droll mistake, the G at the end, which eventually came through, may have been a telepathic echo of these hesitations of mine. And then, in the velvet of a summer night, my broodings over the filer I had with me. Oh, miserly Hamburg! Was he not a very enchanted hunter as he deliberated with himself over his box full of magic ammunition? To rout the monster of insomnia, should he try himself one of those amethyst capsules? There were 40 of them, all told 40 nights with a frail little sleeper at my throbbing side. Could I rob myself of one such night in order to sleep? Certainly not. Much too precious was each tiny plum, each microscopic planetarium with its live stardust. Oh, let me be mawkish for the nonce. I am so tired of being cynical. 26. This daily headache in the opaque air of this tumble jail is disturbing, but I must persevere. Have written more than 100 pages and not got anywhere yet. My calendar is getting confused. That must have been around August 15, 1947. Don't think I can go on. Heart, head, everything. Lolita, 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 Lolita. Repeat till the page is full, printer. 27. Still in Parkington. Finally, I did achieve an hour's slumber from which I was aroused by gratuitous and horribly exhausting congress with a small hairy hermaphrodite, a total stranger. By then it was 6 in the morning, and it suddenly occurred to me it might be a good thing to arrive at the camp earlier than I had said. From Parkington I had still 100 miles to go, and there would be more than that to the hazy hills and Bryceland. If I had said I would come for Dolly in the afternoon, it was only because my fancy insisted on merciful night falling as soon as possible upon my impatience. But now I foresaw all kinds of misunderstandings and was all eager lest delay might give her the opportunity of some idle telephone call to Romsdale. However, when at 9:30 a.m. I attempted to start, I was confronted by a dead battery, and noon was nigh when at last I left Parkington. I reached my destination around 2:30, parked my car in a pine grove where a green-shirted, red-headed impish lad stood throwing horseshoes in sullen solitude, was laconically directed by him to an office in a stucco cottage, in a dying state, had to endure for several minutes the inquisitive commiseration of the camp mistress, a sluttish worn-out female with rusty hair. Dolly, she said, was all packed and ready to go. She knew her mother was sick but not critically. Would Mr. Haze, Mr. Humbert, care to meet the camp counselors? Or look at the cabins where the girls live? Each dedicated to a Disney creature? Or visit the lodge? Or should Charlie be sent over to fetch her? The girls were just finishing fixing the dining room for a dance. And perhaps afterwards she would say to somebody or other, "The poor guy looked like his own ghost." Let me retain for a moment that scene in all its trivial and fateful detail. Hag Holmes writing out a receipt, scratching her head, pulling a drawer out of her desk, pouring change into my impatient palm, then neatly spreading a banknote over it with a bright and 5 photographs of girl children, some gaudy moth or butterfly, still alive, safely pinned to the wall, nature study, the framed diploma of the camp's dietitian, my trembling hands, a card produced by Efficient Homes with a report of Dolly Haze's behavior for July, fair to good, keen on swimming and boating, a sound of trees and birds, and my pounding heart. I was standing with my back to the open door, and then I felt the blood rush to my head as I heard her respiration and voice behind me. She arrived dragging and bumping her heavy suitcase. "Hi," she said, and stood still, looking at me with sly, glad eyes, her soft lips parted in a slightly foolish but wonderfully endearing smile. She was thinner and taller, and for a second it seemed to me her face was less pretty than the mental imprint I had cherished for more than a month. Her cheeks looked hollowed and too much lentigo camouflaged her rosy rustic features, and that first impression, a very narrow human interval between two tiger heartbeats, carried the clear implication that all widower Humbert had to do, wanted to do, or would do, was to give this swan-looking though sun-colored little orphan Oyaxpatis, and even those plumbaceous umbri under her eyes bore freckles, a sound education, a healthy and happy girlhood, a clean home, nice girlfriends of her age among whom, if the fates deigned to repay me, I might find, perhaps, a pretty little Magdalene for Herr Dr. Humbert alone. But in a wink, as the Germans say, the angelic line of conduct was erased, and I overtook my prey. Time moves ahead of our fancies, and she was my Lolita again, in fact, more of my Lolita than ever. I let my hand rest on her warm auburn head and took up her bag. She was all rose and honey, dressed in her brightest gingham, with a pattern of little red apples, and her arms and legs were of a deep golden brown, with scratches like tiny dotted lines of coagulated rubies, and the ribbed cuffs of her white socks were turned down at the remembered level, and because of her childish gait, or because I had memorized her as always wearing heelless shoes, her saddle Oxfords looked somehow too large and too high-heeled for her. Goodbye, Camp Q, merry Camp Q, goodbye, plain unwholesome food, goodbye Charlie boy. In the hot car she settled down beside me, slapped a prompt fly on her lovely knee, then, her mouth working violently on a piece of chewing gum, she rapidly cranked down the window on her side and settled back again. We sped through the striped and speckled forest. "How's mother?" she asked dutifully. I said the doctors did not quite know yet what the trouble was. Anyway, something abdominal. Abominable? No, abdominal. We would have to hang around for a while. The hospital was in the country, near the gay town of Leppingville, where a great poet had resided in the early 19th century and where we would take in all the shows. She thought it a peachy idea and wondered if we could make Leppingville before 9 p.m. We should be at Bryceland by dinner time, I said, and tomorrow we'll visit Leppingville. How was the hike? Did you have a marvelous time at the camp? Huh? Sorry to leave? None. Talk, Lo, don't grunt. Tell me something. What thing, Dad? She let the word expand with ironic deliberation. Any old thing. Okay, if I call you that? Eyes slit at the road. Quite. It's a sketch, you know. When did you fall for my mummy? Someday, Lo, you will understand many emotions and situations, such as for example the harmony, the beauty of spiritual relationship. Bah! Said the cynical nymphette. Shallow lull in the dialogue, filled with some landscape. Look, Lo, at all those cows on that hillside. I think I'll vomit if I look at a cow again. You know, I missed you terribly, Lo. I did not. Fact, I've been revoltingly unfaithful to you, but it does not matter one bit, because you've stopped caring for me, anyway. You drive much faster than my mummy, mister. I slowed down from a blind 70 to a purblind 50. Why do you think I have ceased caring for you, Lo? Well, you haven't kissed me yet, have you? Inly dying, inly moaning, I glimpsed a reasonably wide shoulder of road ahead, and bumped and wobbled into the weeds. Remember, she is only a child, remember, she is only. Hardly had the car come to a standstill than Lolita positively flowed into my arms. Not daring let myself go, not even daring let myself realize that this, sweet wetness and trembling fire, was the beginning of the ineffable life which, ably assisted by fate, I had finally willed into being. Not daring really kiss her, I touched her hot, opening lips with the utmost piety, tiny sips, nothing salacious, but she, with an impatient wriggle, pressed her mouth to mine so hard that I felt her big front teeth and shared in the peppermint taste of her saliva. I knew, of course, it was but an innocent game on her part, a bit of backface foolery and imitation of some simulacrum of fake romance, and since, as the psychotherapist, as well as the rapist, will tell you, the limits and rules of such girlish games are fluid, or at least too childishly subtle for the senior partner to grasp, I was dreadfully afraid I might go too far and cause her to start back in revulsion and terror. And, as above all, I was agonizingly anxious to smuggle her into the hermetic seclusion of the enchanted hunters, and we had still 80 miles to go. Blessed intuition broke our embrace a split second before a highway patrol car drew up alongside. Florid and beetle-browed, its driver stared at me. Happened to see a blue sedan, same make as yours, pass you before the junction? Why, no. We didn't, said Lo, eagerly leaning across me, her innocent hand on my legs, but are you sure it was blue, because the cop, what shadow of us was he after? Gave the little Colleen his best smile and went into a U-turn. We drove on. The fruithead, remarked Lo. He should have nabbed you. Why me, for heaven's sake? Well, the speed in this bum state is 50, and no, don't slow down, you dull bulb. He is gone now. We have still quite a stretch, I said, and I want to get there before dark. So be a good girl. Bad girl, said Lo comfortably. Juvenile delinquent, but frank and fetching. That light was red. I've never seen such driving. We rolled silently through a silent townlet. Say, wouldn't Mother be absolutely mad if she found out we were lovers? Good Lord, Lo, let us not talk that way. But we are lovers, aren't we? Not that I know of. I think we are going to have some more rain. Don't you want to tell me of those little pranks of yours in camp? You talk like a book, Dad. What have you been up to? I insist you tell me. Are you easily shocked? No. Go on. Let us turn into a secluded lane and I'll tell you. Lo, I must seriously ask you not to play the fool. Well? Well, I joined in all the activities that were offered. Sweet. And suit, I was taught to live happily and richly with others and to develop a wholesome personality. Be a cake, in fact. Yes. I saw something of the sort in the booklet. We loved the sings around the fire in the big stone fireplace or under the darned stars, wherever a girl merged her own spirit of happiness with the voice of the group. Your memory is excellent, Lo, but I must trouble you to leave out the swear words. Anything else? The Girl Scouts motto, said Lo rhapsodically, is also mine. I fill my life with worthwhile deeds such as never mind what. My duty is to be useful. I am a friend to male animals. I obey orders. I am cheerful. That was another police car. I am thrifty and I am absolutely filthy in thought, word and deed. Now I do hope that's all, you witty child. Yep. That's all. No, wait a second, we baked in a reflector oven. Isn't that terrific? Well, that's better. We washed zillions of dishes. Zillions, you know, is schoolmarm slang for many, 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 many. Oh yes, last but not least, as mother says, now let me see, what was it? I know we made shadographs. Gee, what fun. Say, bien tout? Say. Except for one little thing, something I simply can't tell you without blushing all over. Will you tell it me later? If we sit in the dark and you let me whisper, I will. Do you sleep in your old room or in a heap with mother? Old room. Your mother may have to undergo a very serious operation, Lo. Stop at that candy bar, will you? Said Lo. Sitting on a high stool, a band of sunlight crossing her bare brown forearm, Lolita was served an elaborate ice cream concoction topped with synthetic syrup. It was erected and brought her by a pimply brute of a boy in a greasy bow tie who eyed my fragile child in her thin cotton frock with carnal deliberation. My impatience to reach Bryceland and the Enchanted Hunters was becoming more than I could endure. Fortunately, she dispatched the stuff with her usual alacrity. How much cash do you have? I asked. Not a cent, she said sadly, lifting her eyebrows, showing me the empty inside of her money purse. This is a matter that will be mended in due time, I rejoined archly. Are you coming? Say, I wonder if they have a washroom. You are not going there, I said firmly. It is sure to be a vile place. Do come on. She was on the whole an obedient little girl and I kissed her in the neck when we got back into the car. Don't do that, she said, looking at me with unfeigned surprise. Don't drool on me. You dirty man. She rubbed the spot against her raised shoulder. Sorry, I murmured. I'm rather fond of you, that's all. We drove under a gloomy sky, up the winding road, then down again. Well, I'm also sort of fond of you, said Lolita in a delayed soft voice, with a sort of sigh, and sort of settled closer to me. Oh, my Lolita, we shall never get there. Dusk was beginning to saturate pretty little Bryceland, its phony colonial architecture, curiosity shops and imported shade trees, when we drove through the weakly lighted streets in search of the Enchanted Hunters. The air, despite a steady drizzle beating it, was warm and green, and a queue of people, mainly children and old men, had already formed before the box office of a movie house, dripping with jewel fires. Oh, I want to see that picture. Let's go right after dinner. Oh, let's. We might, chanted Humbert, knowing perfectly well, the sly tumescent devil, that by 9, when his show began, she would be dead in his arms. Easy! Cried Lo, lurching forward, as an accursed truck in front of us, its backside carbuncles pulsating, stopped at a crossing. If we did not get to the hotel soon, immediately, miraculously, in the very next block, I felt I would lose all control over the Haze jalopy with its ineffectual wipers and whimsical brakes, but the passers-by I applied to for directions were either strangers themselves or asked with a frown, enchanted what? As if I were a madman, or else they went into such complicated explanations, with geometrical gestures, geographical generalities and strictly local clues. Then bear south after you hit the courthouse, that I could not help losing my way in the maze of their well-meaning gibberish. Lo, whose lovely prismatic entrails had already digested the sweetmeat, was looking forward to a big meal and had begun to fidget. As to me, although I had long become used to a kind of secondary fate, McFate's inept secretary, so to speak, pettily interfering with the boss's generous magnificent plan to grind and grope through the avenues of Bryceland, was perhaps the most exasperating ordeal I had yet faced. In later months I could laugh at my inexperience when recalling the obstinate boyish way in which I had concentrated upon that particular inn with its fancy name, for all along our route countless motor courts proclaimed their vacancy in neon lights, ready to accommodate salesmen, escaped convicts, impotents, family groups, as well as the most corrupt and vigorous couples. Ah, gentle drivers gliding through summer's black nights, what frolics, what twists of lust, you might see from your impeccable highways if comfy cabins were suddenly drained of their pigments and became as transparent as boxes of glass. The miracle I hankered for did happen after all. A man and a girl, more or less conjoined in a dark car under dripping trees, told us we were in the heart of the park, but had only to turn left at the next traffic light and there we would be. We did not see any next traffic light. In fact, the park was as black as the sins it concealed, but soon after falling under the smooth spell of a nicely graded curve, the travelers became aware of a diamond glow through the mist, then a gleam of lake water appeared and there it was, marvelously and inexorably, under spectral trees, at the top of a graveled drive, the pale palace of the enchanted hunters. A row of parked cars, like pigs at a trough, seemed at first sight to forbid access, but then, by magic, a formidable convertible, resplendent, rubious in the lighted rain, came into motion, was energetically backed out by a broad-shouldered driver, and we gratefully slipped into the gap it had left. I immediately regretted my haste, for I noticed that my predecessor had now taken advantage of a garage-like shelter nearby where there was ample space for another car, but I was too impatient to follow his example. "Wow! Looks swank," remarked my vulgar darling, squinting at the stucco as she crept out into the audible drizzle and with a childish hand tweaked loose the frock fold that had struck in the peach cleft, to quote Robert Browning. Under the arc lights enlarged replicas of chestnut leaves plunged and played on white pillars. I unlocked the trunk compartment. A hunchbacked and hoary Negro in a uniform of sorts took our bags and wheeled them slowly into the lobby. It was full of old ladies and clergymen. Lolita sank down on her haunches to caress a pale-faced, blue-freckled, black-eared cocker spaniel swooning on the floral carpet under her hand, as who would not, my heart, while I cleared my throat through the throng to the desk. There, a bald porcine old man, everybody was old in that old hotel, examined my features with a polite smile, then leisurely produced my garbled telegram, wrestled with some dark doubts, turned his head to look at the clock, and finally said he was very sorry. He had held the room with the twin beds till 6:30, and now it was gone. A religious convention, he said, had clashed with a flower show in Bryceland, and the name, I said coldly, is not Humbert and not Humbug, but Herbert, I mean Humbert, and any room will do. Just put in a cot for my little daughter. She is 10 and very tired. The pink old fellow peered good-naturedly at Lowe's, still squatting, listening in profile, lips parted, to what the dog's mistress, an ancient lady swathed in violet veils, was telling her from the depths of a cretonne easy-chair. Whatever doubts the obscene fellow had, they were dispelled by that blossom-like vision. He said he might still have a room, had one, in fact, with a double bed. As to the cot, Mr. Potts, do we have any cots left? Potts, also pink and bald, with white hairs growing out of his ears and other holes, would see what could be done. He came and spoke while I unscrewed my fountain pen. Impatient Humbert. Our double beds are really triple, Potts cozily said, tucking me and my kid in. One crowded night we had 3 ladies and a child like yours sleep together. I believe one of the ladies was a disguised man, my static. However, would there be a spare cot in 49, Mr. Swine? I think it went to the swoons, said Swine, the initial old clown. We'll manage somehow, I said. My wife may join us later, but even then, I suppose, we'll manage. The 2 pink pigs were now among my best friends. In the slow clear hand of crime I wrote, Dr. Edgar H. Humbert and daughter, 342 Lawn Street, Ramsdale. A key, 342, was half shown to me, magician showing object he is about to palm and handed over to Uncle Tom. Lo, leaving the dog as she would leave me someday, rose from her haunches, a raindrop fell on Charlotte's grave, a handsome young negress slipped open the elevator door, and the doomed child went in, followed by her throat-clearing father and crayfish Tom with the bags. Parody of a hotel corridor. Parody of silence and death. "Say, it's our house number," said cheerful Lo. There was a double bed, a mirror, a double bed in the mirror, a closet door with mirror, a bathroom door ditto, a blue dark window, a reflected bed there, the same in the closet mirror, 2 chairs, a glass-top table, 2 bed tables, a double bed, a big panel bed, to be exact, with a Tuscan rose chenille spread, and 2 frilled, pink-shaded night lamps, left and right. I was tempted to place a $5 bill in that sepia palm, but thought the largesse might be misconstrued, so I placed a quarter. Added another. He withdrew. Click. "Infant cells. Are we going to sleep in one room?" said Lo, her features working in that dynamic way they did not cross or disgusted, though plain on the brink of it, but just dynamic when she wanted to load a question with violent significance. "I've asked them to put in a cot. Which I'll use if you like." "You're crazy," said Lo. "Why, my darling?" "Because, my darling, when darling mother finds out she'll divorce you and strangle me." Just dynamic. Not really taking the matter too seriously. "Now look here," I said, sitting down, while she stood, a few feet away from me, and stared at herself contentedly, not unpleasantly surprised at her own appearance, filling with her own rosy sunshine the surprised and pleased closet door mirror. "Look here, Lo. Let's settle this once for all. For all practical purposes I am your father. I have a feeling of great tenderness for you. In your mother's absence I am responsible for your welfare. We are not rich, and while we travel, we shall be thrown a good deal together. 2 people sharing one room, inevitably enter into a kind, how shall I say, a kind, the word is incest," said Lo, and walked into the closet, walked out again with a young golden giggle, opened the adjoining door, and after carefully peering inside with her strange smoky eyes lest she make another mistake, retired to the bathroom. I opened the window, tore off my sweat-drenched shirt, changed, checked the pill vial in my coat pocket, unlocked the she drifted out. I tried to embrace her, casually, a bit of controlled tenderness before dinner. She said, "Look, let's cut out the kissing game and get something to eat." It was then that I sprang my surprise. Oh, what a dreamy pet. She walked up to the open suitcase as if stalking it from afar, at a kind of slow-motion walk, peering at that distant treasure box on the luggage support. Was there something wrong, I wondered, with those great grey eyes of hers, or were we both plunged in the same enchanted mist? She stepped up to it, lifting her rather high-heeled feet rather high, and bending her beautiful boy knees while she walked through dilating space with the languor of one walking underwater or in a flight dream. Then she raised by the armlets a copper-colored, charming and quite expensive vest, very slowly stretching it between her silent hands as if she were a bemused bird hunter holding his breath over the incredible bird he spreads out by the tips of its flaming wings. Then, while I stood waiting for her, she pulled out the slow snake of a brilliant belt and tried it on. Then she crept into my waiting arms, radiant, relaxed, caressing me with her tender, mysterious, impure, indifferent, twilight eyes for all the world, like the cheapest of cheap cuties. For that is what nymphets imitate while we moan and die. "What's the catter with Mrs.?" I muttered, word control gone, into her hair. "If you must know," she said, "you do it the wrong way." "Show, White Ray." "All in good time," responded the spoonrat. "Sheva Ascendez, Pulsata, Brillians, Kaiselans, Dementissima. Elevator clatterns, Passa, clatterns, Populus in Corridoro. Hank Nice Imurs my Hiadimat Nemo. Juncia Puila, Joe Pensivo Fondisime, Nobserva Nile Quidquam, but, of course, in another moment I might have committed some dreadful blunder. Fortunately, she returned to the treasure box. From the bathroom, where it took me quite a time to shift back into normal gear for a humdrum purpose, I heard, standing, drumming, retaining my breath, my Lolita's O's and G's of girlish delight. She had used the soap only because it was sample soap. "Well, come on, my dear, if you are as hungry as I am." And so to the elevator, daughter swinging her old white purse, father walking in front, nota bene, never behind. She is not a lady. As we stood, now side by side, waiting to be taken down, she threw back her head, yawned without restraint and shook her curls. When did they make you get up at that camp? 1:30. She stifled another yawn, 6 yawn in full with a shiver of all her frame. 1:30, she repeated, her throat filling up again. The dining room met us with a smell of fried fat and a faded smile. It was a spacious and pretentious place with maudlin murals depicting enchanted hunters in various postures and states of enchantment amid a medley of pallid animals, dryads and trees. A few scattered old ladies, 2 clergymen, and a man in a sports coat were finishing their meals in silence. The dining room closed at 9, and the green-clad, poker-faced serving girls were, happily, in a desperate hurry to get rid of us. "Does not he look exactly, but exactly, like Quilty?" said Lo in a soft voice, her sharp brown elbow not pointing, but visibly burning to point, at the lone diner in the loud checks, in the far corner of the room. "Like our fat Ramsdale dentist?" Lo rested the mouthful of water she had just taken, and put down her dancing glass. "Course not," she said with a splutter of mirth. "I meant the writer fellow in the Drome's ad. Oh, fame. Oh, femina." When the dessert was plunked down, a huge wedge of cherry pie for the young lady and vanilla ice cream her protector, most of which she expeditiously added to her pie, produced a small vial containing Papa's purple pills. As I look back at those seasick murals, at that strange and monstrous moment, I can only explain my behavior then by the mechanism of that dream vacuum wherein revolves a deranged mind, but at the time, it all seemed quite simple and inevitable to me. I glanced around, satisfied myself that the last diner had left, removed the stopped, and with the utmost deliberation tipped the filter into my palm. I had carefully rehearsed before a mirror the gesture of clapping my empty hand to my open mouth and swallowing a fictitious pill. As I expected, she pounced upon the vial with its plump, beautifully colored capsules loaded with Beauty's Sleep. "Blue!" she exclaimed. "Violet blue! What are they made of?" "Summer skies," I said, "and plums and figs, and the grape blood of emperors." "No, seriously please." "Oh, just per pills. Vitamin X makes one strong as an ox or an axe. Want to try one?" Lolita stretched out her hand, nodding vigorously. I had hoped the drug would work fast. It certainly did. She had had a long day. She had gone rowing in the morning with Barbara, whose sister was waterfront director, as the adorable accessible nymph had now started to tell me in between suppressed pallid humping yawns, growing in volume. Oh, how fast the magic potion worked! And had been active in other ways too. The movie that had vaguely loomed in her mind was, of course, by the time we water-treated out of the dining room, forgotten. As we stood in the elevator, she leaned against me, faintly smiling. "Wouldn't you like me to tell you?" half closing her dark-lidded eyes. "Sleepy, huh?" said Uncle Tom, who was bringing up the quiet Franco-Irish gentleman and his daughter, as well as 2 withered women, experts in roses. They looked with sympathy at my frail, tanned, doddering, dazed Rosa darling. I had almost to carry her into our room. There, she sat down on the edge of the bed, swaying a little, speaking in dull, long-drawn tones. If I tell you, will you promise, sleepy?" So sleepy head lolling, eyes going out, "Promise you won't make complaints?" "Later, Lo. Now go to bed. I'll leave you here, and you go to bed. Give you 10 minutes. Oh, I've been such a disgusting girl," she went on, shaking her hair, removing with slow fingers a velvet hair ribbon. "Lemme tell you tomorrow, Lo. Go to bed for goodness sake, to bed." I pocketed the key and walked downstairs. 28. Gentlewomen of the jury. Bear with me. Allow me to take just a tiny bit of your precious time. So this was the grand moment. I had left my Lolita still sitting on the edge of the abysmal bed, drowsily raising her foot, fumbling at the shoelaces and showing as she did so the nether side of her thigh up to the crotch of her panties. She had always been singularly absent-minded, or shameless, or both, in matters of leg show. This, then, was the hermetic vision of her which I had locked in after satisfying myself that the door carried no inside bolt. The key, with its numbered dangler of carved wood, became forthwith the weighty sesame to a rapturous and formidable future. It was mine, it was part of my hot hairy fist. In a few minutes, say 20, say half an hour, Seicher Seicher, as my uncle Gustav used to say, I would let myself into that 342 and find my nymphette, my beauty and bride, imprisoned in her crystal sleep. Jurors. If my happiness could have talked, it would have filled that genteel hotel with a deafening roar. And my only regret today is that I did not quietly deposit key 342 at the office, and leave the town, the country, the continent, the hemisphere, indeed, the globe that very same night. Let me explain. I was not unduly disturbed by her self-accusatory innuendos. I was still firmly resolved to pursue my policy of sparing her purity by operating only in the stealth of night, only upon a completely anesthetized little nude. Restraint and reverence were still my motto, even if that purity, incidentally, thoroughly debunked by modern science, had been slightly damaged through some juvenile erotic experience, no doubt homosexual, at that accursed camp of hers. Of course, in my old-fashioned, old-world way, I, Jean-Jacques Humbert, had taken for granted, when I first met her, that she was as unravished as the stereotypical notion of normal child had been since the lamented end of the ancient world BC and its fascinating practices. We are not surrounded in our enlightened era by little slave flowers that can be casually plucked between business and bath as they used to be in the days of the Romans, and we do not, as dignified Orientals did in still more luxurious times, use tiny entertainers fore and aft between the mutton and the rose sherbet. The whole point is that the old link between the adult world and the child world has been completely severed nowadays by new customs and new laws. Despite my having dabbled in psychiatry and social work, I really knew very little about children. After all, Lolita was only 12, and no matter what concessions I made to time and place, even bearing in mind the crude behavior of American school children, I still was under the impression that whatever went on among those brash brats, went on at a later age, and in a different environment. Therefore, to retrieve the thread of this explanation, the moralist in me bypassed the issue by clinging to conventional notions of what 12-year-old girls should be. The child therapist in me, a fake, as most of them are, but no matter, regurgitated neo-Freudian hash and conjured up a dreaming and exaggerating dolly in the latency period of girlhood. Finally, the sensualist in me, a great and insane monster, had no objection to some depravity in his prey. But somewhere behind the raging bliss, bewildered shadows conferred, and not to have heeded them, this is what I regret. Human beings, attend. I should have understood that Lolita had already proved to be something quite different from innocent Annabelle, and that the nymphian evil breathing through every pore of the fey child that I had prepared for my secret delectation, would make the secrecy impossible, and the delectation lethal. I should have known, by the signs made to me by something in Lolita, the real child Lolita, or some haggard angel behind her back, that nothing but pain and horror would result from the expected rapture. Oh, winged gentlemen of the jury! And she was mine, the key was in my fist was in my pocket, she was mine. In the course of evocations and schemes to which I had dedicated so many insomnias, I had gradually eliminated all the superfluous blur, and by stacking level upon level of translucent vision, had evolved a final picture. Naked, except for one sock and her charm bracelet, spread-eagled on the bed where my filter had felled her so I foreglimpsed her, a velvet hair ribbon was still clutched in her hand, her honey-brown body, with the white negative image of a rudimentary swimsuit patterned against her tan, presented to me its pale breast buds. In the rosy lamplight, a little pubic floss glistened on its plump hillock. The cold key with its warm wooden addendum was in my pocket. I wandered through various public rooms, glory below, gloom above, for the look of lust always is gloomy. Lust is never quite sure even when the velvety victim is locked up in one's dungeon that some rival devil or influential god may still not abolish one's prepared triumph. In common parlance, I needed a drink, but there was no barroom in that venerable place full of perspiring Philistines and period objects. I drifted to the men's room. There, a person in the clerical black a hearty party commandit checking with the assistance of Vienna, if it was still there, inquired of me how I had liked Dr. Boyd's talk, and looked puzzled when I, King Sigmund II, said Boyd was quite a boy. Upon which, I neatly chucked the tissue paper I had been wiping my sensitive fingertips with into the receptacle provided for it, and sallied lobbyward. Comfortably resting my elbows on the counter, I asked Mr. Potts was he quite sure my wife had not telephoned, and what about that cot? He answered she had not. She was dead, of course, and the cot would be installed tomorrow if we decided to stay on. From a big crowded place called the Hunters' Hall came a sound of many voices discussing horticulture or eternity. Another room, called the Raspberry Room, all bathed in light, with bright little tables and a large one with refreshments, was still empty except for a hostess, that type of worn woman with a glassy smile and Charlotte's manner of speaking. She floated up to me to ask if I was Mr. Braddock, because if so, Miss Beard had been looking for me. What a name for a woman, I said and strolled away. In and out of my heart flowed my rainbow blood. I would give her till 9:30. Going back to the lobby, I found there a change. A number of people in floral dresses or black cloth had formed little groups here and there, and some elfish chance offered me the sight of a delightful child of Lolita's age, in Lolita's type of frock, but pure white, and there was a white ribbon in her black hair. She was not pretty, but she was a nymphette, and her ivory pale legs and lily neck formed for one memorable moment a most pleasurable antiphony, in terms of spinal music, to my desire for Lolita, brown and pink, flushed and fouled. The pale child noticed my gaze, which was really quite casual and debonair, and being ridiculously self-conscious, lost countenance completely, rolling her eyes and putting the back of her hand to her cheek, and pulling at the hem of her skirt, and finally turning her thin mobile shoulder blades to me in specious chat with her cow-like mother. I left the loud lobby and stood outside, on the white steps, looking at the hundreds of powdered bugs wheeling around the lamps in the soggy black night, full of ripple and stir. All I would dare do would amount to such a trifle. Suddenly I was aware that in the darkness next to me there was somebody sitting in a chair on the pillared porch. I could not really see him, but what gave him away was the rasp of a screwing off, then a discreet gurgle, then the final note of a placid screwing on. I was about to move away when his voice addressed me. "Where the devil did you get her?" "I beg your pardon?" I said. "The weather is getting better." "Seems so." "Who's the lassie?" "My daughter." "You lie, she's not." "I beg your pardon?" I said. July was hot. "Where's her mother?" "Dead." "I see. Sorry. By the way, why don't you two lunch with me tomorrow? That dreadful crowd will be gone by then." "We'll be gone too. Good night." "Sorry. I'm pretty drunk." "Good night. That child of yours needs a lot of sleep. Sleep is a rose, as the Persians say. Smoke? Not now." He struck a light, but because he was drunk, or because the wind was, the flame illumined not him but another person, a very old man, one of those permanent guests of old hotels, and his white rocker. Nobody said anything and the darkness returned to its initial place. Then I heard the old-timer cough and deliver himself of some sepulchral mucus. I left the porch. At least half an hour in all had elapsed. I ought to have asked for a sip. The strain was beginning to tell. If a violin string can ache, then I was that string. But it would have been unseemly to display any hurry. As I made my way through a constellation of fixed people in one corner of the lobby, there came a blinding flash and beaming Dr. Braddock, two orchid-ornamentalized matrons, the small girl in white, and presumably the bared teeth of Humbert Humbert sidling between the bridal classy and the enchanted cleric, were immortalized insofar as the texture and print of small-town newspapers can be deemed immortal. A twittering group had gathered near the elevator. I again chose the stairs. 342 was near the fire escape. One could still, but the key was already in the lock, and then I was in the room,